Welcome to the ICS with Gabe Podcast. We're here, we talk about industrial cybersecurity, the latest happenings in the field, and cybersecurity as a whole. I'll also be providing you some tips and some learning resources for getting into this particular flavor of cybersecurity. So again, sit back and welcome to the ICS with Gabe Podcast. Hello everybody, my name is Gabriel and welcome to episode 1 of ICS with Gabe, and it is entitled Who Am I? And pretty much we're going to be going over who am I guess, as the podcaster. Number 2, we'll be going over why did I desire to start the podcast, and also where I desire to take the podcast. So starting off from the beginning, who am I, right? My name is Gabriel Agbarucci, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, born, raised, and educated in Detroit, Michigan. Went to Detroit Public Schools and eventually transitioned to Michigan Technological University, where I majored in electrical engineering. There was a very eventful, interesting experience coming from a major city like Detroit, Michigan, and going way up north to Michigan Technological University, which is in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, in the cold and in the less than urban environment. It was a very interesting shift from the city again to the rural environment in Michigan Tech, but it was a good experience, a very valuable engineering environment. So majoring in electrical engineering, focused on power systems, and graduated like a lot of individuals do in Michigan, right? Having the big 3, Ford, Chrysler, and GM automotive companies. A lot of people just go right there into automotive. So that's what I did. I became an electrical engineering graduate, and I went into a tier 1 supplier. I haven't talked about them in a long time. A tier 1 supplying organization to Ford Motor Company. And there I was a wire harness design engineer, which was very good. It was a lot of good experience, definitely right out of college, where I was able to design. So we designed like the electrical distribution and the wire harnesses for Ford vehicles. And then we traveled down to Mexico, where we would pretty much make sure that what we designed is what they were manufacturing on the line. So we would do a lot of process improvement, Six Sigma stuff, really trying to make sure that our defects were the lowest before the Ford employees will come and make sure that everything was good from our tier 1 partnership side. So that was a very interesting experience. But one thing that caused me to transition from that was the fact that I noticed I wasn't being trained. I wasn't really learning a lot of new skills. As a fresh graduate out of college, I wanted to continuously grow my experience, grow my knowledge base. But I was noticing that the same things that I was doing in my role as a very new wire harness design engineer was the same thing that a lot of individuals maybe 2, 5, 9, 11 years later were doing. So I was noticing that there wasn't a lot of growth opportunities. It was pretty much learning what everyone did and just doing that continually over and over and over again for different vehicle lines. And I just found that was something that I didn't want to do and something that I didn't do. So I started to look around. So eventually, again, staying there in Michigan, I worked for a local utility, but I transitioned into nuclear. Into the nuclear side. So I started working at an actual nuclear power plant, which is super cool, right? Coming from the inner city of Detroit, you really don't hear of a lot of nuclear engineers that come out of our education system, but it was something I was very happy to be involved with. So I transitioned working as pretty much a nuclear INC engineer, or nuclear instrumentation and controls engineer, kind of focusing there in that cybersecurity area. And it was very interesting because what had happened not too many years before I started in this organization was Stuxnet, right? A very popular malware that kind of ravaged the Middle East, or in that particular circumstance. And it pretty much caused waves around the entire nuclear or commercial nuclear industry, where we started implementing certain cybersecurity guidance in our nuclear plant that would fight or thwart against that of Stuxnet, where we noticed that the initial attack vector was that of removable media or a USB drive. So a lot of guidance came down through what you call the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, for us to have a removable media program where removable media like disk drives, or like CD drives or USB drives were not able to touch particular critical nuclear systems. So it's a very interesting experience. So had that experience and recognized that I wanted to become more, kind of get my hands in the weeds, right? Rather than very much so focusing on a nuclear plants program, cybersecurity program. I wanted to get more into the industry, where I started to hit the road and started doing some contract work at different organizations, still sticking there as a nuclear cybersecurity engineer. And then eventually I transitioned into a security architect role, where there I worked with the electrical utility product maker. And that was a very good experience. And I also focused a bit on microgrid solutions, so cybersecurity solutions for microgrids. And then eventually I wound up as a senior consultant for a pretty great consulting firm called Mandiant FireEye. So that's kind of that particular career journey of where I started from there in electrical engineering, power systems, automotive, then transitioned to industrial control systems, cybersecurity as a consultant. So that's kind of that career progression or that career structure. So now I'll get into the question of why did I want to start this podcast? And I think I have probably three major reasons for why. I think the first reason comes in the fact that I believe that there can be a lot of voices in the industrial security space. I know that we have many leaders or organizations that are leading, and I don't think that there can be any short of voices. And I guess the reason for me starting the podcast is just throwing my own voice in there, right? Some of my own ideas about the industry and some things that are happening. I definitely desire to speak on it because it's actually one of those lesser known security industries and disciplines that we see in the current industry. And I just greatly desire to speak on it. So I guess that's the first reason, is to kind of just have a voice in this particular industry. The second is that there is not only ethical hacking and offensive security in cybersecurity. Like a lot of times people kind of look at cybersecurity and say, oh, you can be a hacker. I want to hack this, hack that. Let me go get this CE8 certification or the OSCP or OSCE. Or GPAN. Let me focus on getting those to get into cybersecurity, where I think that ethical hacking and offensive security is extremely interesting. But I also think that ICS, industrial control system cybersecurity, is also just as interesting. So I guess kind of getting that word out to individuals who are interested in transitioning into cybersecurity, that industrial cybersecurity is also a choice. You don't only have to be a hacker or only do blue team work. You can also focus on industrial cybersecurity. So that's probably the second reason. And the third reason is definitely that we need more people. I mean, I don't know how many times a recruiter has reached out to me about a particular role. And after I would say, hey, I'm happy in my current role, they would ask, hey, do you know of any others who are looking or who have similar skill sets? And I don't have an answer to that question. I don't have an individual like right off the back that would be interested or even have the skill set or that interesting skill set of industrial and cybersecurity type of experience. So the third reason definitely that I desire to speak on this or start this podcast is because we need more people. So getting the word out about the industry is, I think, extremely important in getting individuals interested in joining the ranks of industrial security professionals. So then kind of to the last point is where I desire to take the podcast. One, I desire for it to be informative. One is that there's always things that are happening, especially on InfoSec Twitter or even ICS, OT security Twitter. There are a lot of things that happens with large organizations or large manufacturers or firms are doing particular things that are very interesting in this particular space. So I definitely desire to be informative of some of the latest happenings that are happening in the industry, and of course conferences and those things. So be informative to the audience. Also, like I said, I do desire to talk about some of the latest happenings and things that can kind of keep people abreast of the pulse and the temperature of the current industry. I also desire to share with the audience some of my latest projects, right? Things and interesting things that I'm doing in my, I guess, role, and also even some side projects. So that might be an area where I desire to go more and more into. And also interviews, right? I'm not the most interesting or the only individual in this particular industry. So I desire to bring on individuals and have interviews with people who have had greater experience or could also be very brand new to the particular industry. So doing interviews with individuals in control systems, cybersecurity, I think that would probably be the fourth piece that I would like to bring to this particular platform. So again, this is a Who Am I episode, and just wanted to give you an introduction of who I am, and really where I desire to take this thing. So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time, and I'm looking forward to getting back with you with episode 2. So thank you, and come back.